The lights in the corridor were always blue at night. Park Do-hun had worked in the Veloran Imperial Embassy for 5 years now, and he still was not used to the blue. It made everything look cold and strange. But he did not complain. He never complained. He just pushed his cleaning cart forward and did his job. Do-hun was 42 years old. His hair was turning gray at the sides, and his hands were rough from years of hard work. He was not a soldier. He was not a scientist. He was not important at all. He was just a janitor, the only human janitor in the entire orbital station that floated high above the planet called Velora. The Velorans were tall beings with silver skin and 4 eyes. They were proud and powerful. They had built an empire that covered 100 star systems. To them, humans were small and weak and not very interesting. Most Velorans did not even look at Do-hun when he cleaned their floors. He was invisible to them, just another piece of equipment like the machines that recycled the air. But Do-hun did not mind being invisible. In fact, he liked it, because being invisible meant no one asked questions. No one wondered why he hurried back to the custodial quarters every night. No one knew about the 2 small children waiting for him there. Tonight, like every night, Do-hun finished his work at exactly midnight. He put away his cleaning supplies and walked quickly through the empty halls. His heart beat a little faster as he got closer to his room. It always did. Even after 3 years, the feeling never went away. He opened the door to the small custodial quarters. It was not a nice room. There was 1 bed, 1 table, 1 window that looked out at the stars. The walls were gray metal. The floor was cold, but to Do-hun it was home. 2 small figures sat on the bed waiting for him. When they saw him, their faces lit up with joy. Lyra and Kale were 6 years old. They had silver skin like all Velorans and large dark eyes that seemed too big for their small faces. But unlike other Veloran children, they could not hear. They had been born deaf, and in Veloran society, that meant they were worthless. The Velorans believed that deaf children were cursed. They thought deafness was a punishment from the gods. Deaf children brought shame to their families. Most of them were abandoned or worse. That was just how things were. That was the Veloran way. 3 years ago, Do-hun had been cleaning the recycling bay when he heard a strange sound. It was soft, like a small animal crying. He followed the sound to a pile of garbage waiting to be processed. And there, inside a disposal crate, he found them. 2 tiny children, barely 3 years old, holding each other in the darkness. They were so thin he could see their ribs. They were so scared they could not even cry anymore. Someone had thrown them away like trash. Do-hun did not think about the rules. He did not think about the danger. He just picked them up, 1 in each arm, and carried them to his room. He cleaned them. He fed them. He wrapped them in his only blanket and held them until they stopped shaking. That night he became a father. Now 3 years later, Lyra ran to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Kale followed right behind, grabbing his hand. They could not say welcome home with their voices, but they did not need to. Their eyes said everything. Do-hun smiled and knelt down so he could look at them properly. His hands began to move in the air, forming shapes and signs. This was how they talked. This was the language he had created for them. When Do-hun first brought the children home, he did not know what to do. They could not hear him. They could not understand when he spoke. For the first few weeks, communication was almost impossible. He used simple gestures. He pointed at things. He made faces to show emotions, but it was not enough. Then Do-hun remembered something from his childhood on Earth. His grandmother had been deaf. His mother had taught him sign language when he was young. He had not used it in 30 years, but slowly the memories came back, and he began to teach the twins. At first it was just simple signs: eat, sleep, come, stay. But the children learned so fast. They were hungry for words. They wanted to communicate so badly. Within a year they could have real conversations. Within 2 years they were making up their own signs for things that did not have signs yet. Now Lyra's hands moved quickly in the air. "Father, we learned a new word today." Dohun raised his eyebrows with interest. "Show me." Both twins looked at each other and smiled. Then, together, they made the same sign. They put their hands over their hearts, then spread their arms wide, then brought their hands together like a roof. "Home," they signed together. Dohun felt something warm spread through his chest. He had taught them many words, but he had never taught them that one. They had created it themselves, and it was perfect. He pulled both children into a hug. They could not hear his voice, but he spoke anyway. "Yes," he whispered, "this is home." Later that night, after the children had fallen asleep, Dohun sat by the window and looked at the stars. He thought about how strange life was. He had come to this station because he had nothing left on Earth. No family, no money, no future. He had taken the janitor job because it was the only work available for humans in Veloran space. He had expected to spend the rest of his life alone, cleaning floors until he was too old to work anymore. He had expected nothing. But then he found Lyra and Kale, and everything changed. Raising alien children was not easy. Dohun did not know much about Veloran biology. He had to learn everything by trial and error. What foods were safe for them to eat, how much sleep they needed, why their skin sometimes changed color when they were sick. He made many mistakes, but he never gave up. The hardest part was keeping them hidden. If anyone discovered that he was raising abandoned Veloran children, there would be trouble. The children would be taken away, maybe killed, and Dohun would be punished for interfering with Veloran matters. So he kept them secret. During the day, while he worked, the twins stayed in the room. They played quietly. They read books that Dohun borrowed from the station library. They practiced their sign language. At night, when the station was mostly empty, Dohun sometimes took them for short walks in the maintenance tunnels where no one ever went. It was not a perfect life, but it was their life, and Dohun would protect it with everything he had. He looked at the two small figures sleeping peacefully on the bed. Lyra had her arm around her brother. Kale was holding his favorite toy, a small stuffed animal that Dohun had made from old cleaning rags. They were not human. They did not share his blood, but they were his children, and he loved them more than anything in the universe. Dohun turned off the light and lay down on the floor where he always slept. The bed was too small for all three of them, and he wanted the children to be comfortable. As he closed his eyes, he made the same promise he made every night. He would keep them safe, no matter what. He did not know that tomorrow, everything would change. The next evening started like any other evening. Dohun woke up when the lights in the corridor changed from night blue to day white. He made breakfast for the children from the small food supplies he kept hidden in a box under the bed. Then he got ready for work. Before he left, he knelt down and looked at Lyra and Kale. His hands moved carefully as he signed to them. "Stay in the room. Do not open the door for anyone. I will be back at midnight." The twins nodded. They knew the rules. They had followed the rules for 3 years. Dohun kissed each of them on the forehead and left for his shift. The day passed slowly. Dohun cleaned offices and meeting rooms. He scrubbed floors and polished windows. He emptied trash containers and replaced broken lights. It was boring work, but he did not mind. His body worked automatically while his mind thought about other things. He thought about what he would teach the children tonight. He thought about the new signs they could learn together. At 9 o'clock in the evening, Dohun was assigned to clean the diplomatic wing. This was the most important part of the station. It was where the Veloran nobles met with visitors from other planets. It was where important decisions were made, and it was where the most valuable treasures of the Empire were displayed. Dohun did not like cleaning the diplomatic wing. There were too many guards, too many cameras, too many people who might notice a human doing something he should not do, but he had no choice. When his supervisor told him to clean somewhere, he cleaned there. He pushed his cart through the heavy doors and began his work. The diplomatic wing was beautiful in a cold way. The walls were covered with strange art from 100 different worlds. Display cases held ancient weapons and jewelry and things Dohun could not even identify. Everything looked expensive. Everything looked important. Dohun worked quickly and carefully. He kept his head down and did not look at anything for too long. He was almost finished when he heard a sound that made his blood turn cold. Small footsteps, running, coming toward him. He turned around and saw Lyra and Kale running down the corridor toward him. Their faces were scared. Their hands were moving frantically, trying to tell him something. Dohun's heart nearly stopped. What were they doing here? How did they get out? Why did they leave the room? He ran to meet them, his mind racing with fear. He grabbed Lyra's shoulders and signed quickly. "What happened? Why are you here?" Lyra was crying. Her signs were messy and hard to understand. "There was smoke in the room. We were scared. We tried to find you." Dohun understood immediately. The heating system in the custodial quarters was old and broken. Sometimes it made smoke. He had told the children many times that the smoke was not dangerous, but they were young. They got scared. He pulled both children close and held them tight. They were shaking with fear. He wanted to comfort them. He wanted to tell them everything was okay. But they were in the diplomatic wing, the most restricted area of the station, and if anyone saw them here, they were all in terrible danger. "We have to go," he signed urgently. "Follow me, stay quiet, stay close." He took their hands and started walking toward the door. His cart was still in the middle of the corridor, but he would come back for it later. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting the children out of here. They were almost at the door when Kale tripped. The little boy fell forward and crashed into a display stand. On top of the stand was a vase. It was not just any vase. It was the ceremonial vessel of the first emperor. It was 3,000 years old. It was priceless. It was sacred. And it fell to the floor and shattered into 1,000 pieces. The sound was like an explosion in the quiet corridor. Sharp crystal fragments flew everywhere. For one terrible moment, everything was completely silent. Then the alarm started. Red lights flashed, sirens screamed. Heavy doors slammed shut all around them. They were trapped. There was no way out. Dohun pulled the children behind him and held them tight. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. He had to stay calm. He had to think. There had to be a way out of this. But there was no time to think. Within seconds, guards came running from every direction. They surrounded Dohun and the children with weapons raised. Their 4 eyes burned with anger. One guard stepped forward. He was bigger than the others, with darker silver skin and gold symbols on his uniform that showed his high rank. His name was Vorath, and he was the commander of the diplomatic guard. He was known throughout the station as a cruel and proud Veloran who hated all other species, especially humans. Vorath looked at the broken vase on the floor. Then he looked at Dohun. Then he saw the children hiding behind the human janitor. His face twisted with disgust. "What is this?" he demanded. His voice was cold and sharp like a blade. "You brought children into the sacred halls. You let them destroy the vessel of the first emperor." Dohun kept his voice steady, even though his hands were shaking. "Commander, it was an accident. The children were scared. They did not mean to break anything. I take full responsibility." Vorath laughed. It was not a nice laugh. It was the laugh of someone who enjoyed seeing others suffer. Responsibility, a human taking responsibility. He walked closer, his tall frame casting a shadow over Dohun. "And these children, let me see them." "Commander, please." Vorath pushed Dohun aside and grabbed Lyra by the arm. The little girl screamed, but no sound came out. She struggled and tried to pull away, but the commander was too strong. Vorath studied her face. Then his eyes went wide with understanding. "These are not your children, human. These are Veloran children." He looked closer at Lyra's eyes, at the way she moved her head. Then he threw her back toward Dohun with disgust. "Defectives, cursed ones, I recognize the signs, they cannot hear." He turned to face the other guards. "This human has been hiding cursed children in the station. He has been raising defectives. And now he has let them destroy one of our most sacred treasures." The guards muttered with anger. Some of them raised their weapons higher. The situation was getting worse by the second. Voreth turned back to Dohun. His 4 eyes were filled with hatred and something else, something that looked like pleasure. "Do you know what the punishment is for this crime, human? First, the defectives will be disposed of, as they should have been at birth. Then you will be executed for interfering with Veloran justice." Kale and Lyra could not hear the words, but they understood what was happening. They could see the weapons pointed at them. They could see the hatred in the guards' eyes. They could feel their father's body go stiff with fear. Tears streamed down Lyra's silver cheeks. Kale buried his face in Dohun's leg, his small body shaking with silent sobs. Vorath raised his weapon and pointed it at the children. "Step aside, human. This does not have to be painful." Dohun did not step aside. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He stepped forward. He put his body between his children and the weapon. His voice was calm and steady. There was no fear in it anymore, only determination. "No." Voreth's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said no." Dohun straightened his back and looked the commander directly in the eyes. "These are my children, and you will not touch them." "They are not your children, human. They are Veloran, they are cursed. They are worth nothing." "They are worth everything to me." Voreth laughed again. "You would die for defective aliens that are not even your species." Dohun did not hesitate. "Yes." The commander stopped laughing. He had expected the human to beg for mercy. He had expected fear and weakness. Instead, he saw something he did not understand. He saw a father protecting his children. "Very well," Voreth said coldly. He raised his weapon. "Then you will die first." Dohun closed his eyes and thought of his children. He thought of Lyra's bright smile. He thought of Kale's gentle heart. He thought of all the words they had learned together, all the conversations they had shared in silence. If this was the end, at least he had given them 3 good years. At least he had shown them what love meant. He waited for the shot that would end his life. But it never came. Instead, there was a sound, a soft hiss as the main doors opened, and then footsteps, slow, graceful footsteps that seemed to make the very air stand still. Dohun opened his eyes and saw the Queen. Queen Salith of the Veloran Empire did not walk like normal people walked. She glided. Her feet seemed to barely touch the floor. Her long silver robes flowed behind her like water, and the light from the ceiling made her skin shine like moonlight. She was the most beautiful and terrifying thing Dohun had ever seen. Every guard in the room dropped to their knees instantly. Even Commander Vorath, who had been so proud and cruel just seconds ago, fell to the ground and pressed his forehead against the floor. No one dared to look at the Queen. No one dared to breathe too loudly. But Dohun did not kneel. He could not kneel. His children were behind him, clutching his legs, and he could not move without leaving them unprotected. So he stood there, the only person standing in a room full of kneeling guards, looking directly at the most powerful being in 100 star systems. The Queen stopped walking. Her pale silver eyes moved slowly across the scene before her. She looked at the broken vase on the floor. She looked at the kneeling guards. She looked at Commander Vorath, still pressed against the ground. And then she looked at Dohun. Her eyes stayed on him for a long moment. She did not seem angry. She did not seem pleased. Her face showed nothing at all. It was like looking at a statue made of living silver. "Stand," she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room like a bell. The guards rose to their feet, but they kept their heads down, not daring to meet her gaze. "Explain this," the Queen commanded. "Why are there alarms in my diplomatic wing? Why is the vessel of the first emperor in pieces on my floor? And why is there a human standing in front of me when everyone else is kneeling?" Commander Vorath stepped forward quickly, eager to be the one who answered. His voice was smooth and respectful, but underneath Dohun could hear something else, something cruel and satisfied. "Your Majesty, this human is a janitor who works on the station. He has been hiding two cursed children in the custodial quarters. Tonight, he brought them into the diplomatic wing, and they destroyed the sacred vessel. I was about to execute justice when you arrived." The Queen's eyes moved to Vorath. "Execute justice. The defectives must be disposed of, Your Majesty. It is the law, and the human must be punished for hiding them and allowing them to desecrate this sacred place." The Queen said nothing. She turned her attention back to Dohun. Slowly, gracefully, she walked toward him. The guards moved out of her way like leaves parting before the wind. She stopped just a few feet away from Dohun. This close, he could see details he had not noticed before. The tiny lines around her eyes that showed her great age, the way her robes moved even when there was no wind, the coldness in her gaze that came from 300 years of ruling an empire. "Human," she said, "why do you not kneel?" Dohun's throat was dry. His heart was pounding. Every instinct told him to fall to the ground and beg for mercy. But he could feel Lyra and Kale pressed against his back, their small hands gripping his shirt. They could not hear what was happening, but they knew their father was protecting them. They trusted him. He could not betray that trust. "Your Majesty," Dohun said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I mean no disrespect, but if I kneel, I leave my children unprotected, and I cannot do that." Behind him, he heard Vorath make a sound of anger. The commander started to speak, but the Queen raised one hand slightly, and he went silent immediately. "Your children," the Queen repeated. She looked past Dohun at the two small figures behind him. "The commander called them cursed, defectives. He said they are Veloran children, not human, yet you call them yours." "Yes, Your Majesty, they are mine." "How can that be? Did you steal them?" "No, Your Majesty. I found them 3 years ago. Someone had thrown them away in the recycling bay. They were going to die, so I took them home." The Queen was silent for a moment. Her eyes studied Dohun's face carefully, looking for something. He did not know what she was searching for, but he did not look away. He had nothing to hide. "Bring them forward," the Queen commanded. "I wish to see these children." Dohun hesitated. Every part of him screamed not to do it, but he knew that refusing the Queen was impossible. Slowly, gently, he turned around and knelt down so he was at eye level with Lyra and Kale. Their faces were wet with tears. Their large, dark eyes were wide with fear. But when they saw their father's face, they calmed a little. They trusted him. Dohun's hands moved smoothly as he signed to them. "Do not be afraid. The Queen wants to meet you. I will be right here. I will not let anyone hurt you." The children looked at each other. Then Lyra reached out and took Dohun's hand. Kale took the other. Together, the three of them turned to face the Queen. Queen Salith's eyes widened slightly. It was the first emotion she had shown since entering the room. She watched as Dohun's hands moved in the air, forming strange shapes and patterns. She watched as the children's eyes followed his movements with perfect understanding. And she watched as the children responded, their own small hands dancing in the air. "What is this?" the Queen asked. Her voice was different now, less cold, more curious. "It is language, Your Majesty," Dohun answered. "My children cannot hear, so I taught them to speak with their hands. Every movement means a word. Every pattern means a thought. It is called sign language. Humans have used it for thousands of years." The Queen stared at the children's hands as they continued to sign to each other. Lyra was telling Kale not to be scared. Kale was telling Lyra that he wanted to go home. Simple words, simple thoughts, but to the Queen they might as well have been magic. You created an entire language, she said slowly, for children who are not even your species. No, Your Majesty, the language already existed. My grandmother was deaf. She taught my mother and my mother taught me. I simply taught it to my children. Your grandmother was deaf. The Queen seemed surprised. Humans keep their deaf. Of course, Your Majesty, why would we not? The Queen did not answer. She continued to watch the children's hands move. There was something in her eyes now, something Dohun could not quite read. It might have been wonder, it might have been sadness, it might have been both. Tell me, the Queen said finally, what are they saying now? Dohun looked at his children. Lyra was signing something over and over again, 3 simple signs. Dohun felt his heart swell with love. She is saying, I love Father, he translated. She is saying it again and again. She wants to make sure I know. The Queen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more human if that was possible for a Veloran queen. And what do you say back? Dohun looked at the Queen. Then he knelt down and faced his children. His hands moved slowly, carefully, forming each sign with love. I love you too, both of you, always, no matter what happens. You are my heart. Lyra smiled through her tears. Kale threw his arms around his father's neck. For just a moment, Dohun forgot about the Queen, forgot about the guards, forgot about everything. There was only him and his children, speaking in a language that needed no sound. When he stood up again, the Queen was still watching him. Her face was unreadable, but something had changed. The coldness was gone from her eyes. Commander Vorath, she said without looking at him. The commander stepped forward eagerly. Yes, Your Majesty. You called these children defective, cursed, worthless. Yes, Your Majesty, that is what they are. That is what the law says. The law, the Queen repeated. Tell me, Commander, in 300 years of my rule, has anyone ever created a way for the cursed to speak? Vorath hesitated. No, Your Majesty, but that is because they cannot be helped. They are broken, they are. They are not broken. The Queen's voice was suddenly sharp like a blade. Look at them, Commander. Look at their hands. They are speaking right now. They are having a conversation. They are expressing love and fear and hope and everything else that makes a person alive. Does that seem broken to you? Vorath opened his mouth, but no words came out. He had no answer. The Queen turned back to Dohun. Human, she said, I have ruled this empire for 300 years. I have seen many things, but I have never seen this. I have never seen anyone look at our cursed ones and see something worth saving. I have never seen anyone give them words. She paused, her eyes met Dohun's. Why did you do it? Why did you take children that even their own people had thrown away? Dohun thought about the question. It was a good question. He had never really asked himself why. He had just done it. It had felt right. Because they needed someone, Your Majesty, he said finally. And I was there. It was as simple as that. The Queen nodded slowly. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She reached out and gently touched Lyra's silver hair. The little girl looked up at the Queen with wide eyes, not afraid anymore, just curious. You have given them something precious, the Queen said to Dohun. Something we never gave them, a voice. She straightened up and turned to face Commander Vorath. Her expression was no longer soft. It was cold and hard as steel. Commander Vorath, you are relieved of your duties permanently. Vorath's face went pale. Your Majesty, I was only following the law. The law is what I say it is, the Queen interrupted. And I say that from this day forward these children are no longer cursed. They are no longer defective. They are something new, something we have never had before. They are children who can speak with their hands. She looked at Dohun. And this human is no longer a janitor. He is their father, and he is under my protection. The days after that night changed everything for Park Dohun and his children. Word spread quickly through the station about what had happened in the diplomatic wing. the human janitor who had raised deaf alien children, the commander who had been dismissed by the queen herself, the broken vase that was somehow less important than two small lives. Dohun no longer had to hide. For the first time in 3 years, Lyra and Kale could walk through the station without fear. They could eat in the public food halls. They could look out the big windows at the stars. They could be children. At first, the other Velorans did not know what to think. Some of them stared with disgust. These were people who had spent their whole lives believing that deaf children were cursed, that they should be thrown away like garbage. Seeing them walk freely through the station made them uncomfortable. But others were curious. They watched Lyra and Kale with interest as the twins communicated with their hands. They had never seen anything like it. How could these cursed children be speaking? How could they be laughing and playing and acting like normal children? It did not make sense. 1 week after the incident, Dohun received a message that made his hands shake. The queen wanted to see him, not in the diplomatic wing, in her private chambers, just him. He left the children with a kind Veloran woman named Murray who worked in the station library. She had been one of the first to approach Dohun after the news spread. Her own sister had been born deaf and had disappeared when they were young. She never said what happened to her sister, but the sadness in her eyes told Dohun everything he needed to know. Murray did not know sign language, but she was learning fast. The children liked her. They trusted her, and Dohun needed someone he could trust if he was going to leave them alone to see the queen. The walk to the queen's chambers felt like it took forever. Dohun's mind was full of questions. Why did the queen want to see him alone? Had she changed her mind about protecting them? Was he in trouble? He tried to stay calm, but his heart was beating too fast. 2 guards opened the doors to the queen's private chambers. The room inside was not what Dohun expected. He had thought it would be grand and cold, full of treasures and trophies. Instead, it was simple. There were shelves filled with books. There were paintings of landscapes from many different worlds. There was a large window that looked out at the planet Velora below. Queen Salith was sitting by the window, looking out at the view. She did not turn around when Dohun entered. "Come," she said, "sit with me." There was another chair by the window. Dohun walked over and sat down. He was so nervous he did not know what to do with his hands. He folded them in his lap and waited. For a long moment the queen said nothing. She just looked at the planet below. It was beautiful, Dohun had to admit, swirling clouds of purple and silver, oceans that shone like mirrors, mountains that touched the sky. "I have ruled for 300 years, the queen said finally. "Do you know how long that is for a human?" "A very long time, your majesty." 15 generations, she said. 15 generations of your people have been born and died while I have sat on this throne. I have watched your species grow from primitive creatures struggling to leave your own planet to travelers who explore the galaxy. And in all that time, I never understood humans. She turned to look at Dohun. Her pale eyes seemed to see right through him. "You are weak. You live such short lives. You have no great powers, no special abilities, and yet somehow you have spread across the stars. You have built colonies on 1,000 worlds. You have made friends with species that should have destroyed you. How?" Dohun did not know how to answer. He was just a janitor. He did not understand politics or history or the secrets of human success. But the queen was waiting, so he tried. "I do not know, your majesty. I am not a wise man, but maybe it is because we do not have much time. We know our lives are short, so we try to make every moment count. We try to love as much as we can. We try to help whoever we can, because tomorrow might be our last day." The queen considered this. "You found 2 children who were not your species, not your blood, and you gave them your life. Why? What did you gain?" "Gain?" Dohun shook his head. "I did not think about gaining anything, your majesty. They needed help. I could help, that was all." "But you gave up everything. Your freedom, your safety, your future, all for children who could never truly be yours." They are truly mine, Dohun said firmly. Blood does not make a family, Your Majesty. Love does. I love them. They love me. That makes us family. The queen was silent again. She turned back to the window and looked at her planet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, quieter, more honest. I had a child once, long ago, before I became queen. Dohun did not know what to say. He had not expected this. She was deaf, the queen continued, born without the ability to hear. My family was ashamed. They wanted to dispose of her, as is our custom, but I was young and foolish and I loved her, so I hid her. For 3 years I raised her in secret, just as you raised your children. The queen's hands tightened on the arms of her chair. But I was not as brave as you. I was not as strong. When they finally found her, I did not stand between her and the guards. I did not say no. I let them take her. I let them take my daughter because I was afraid of losing my position, my power, my future. Tears were forming in the queen's ancient eyes. Dohun realized he was seeing something no one had ever seen before. The queen, the ruler of 100 star systems, was crying. She would be 312 years old now, the queen whispered. If I had been as brave as you, if I had stood between her and the world, but I was a coward, and I have regretted it every single day since. Dohun did not know what to say. What could anyone say to that? 300 years of regret, 300 years of grief. It was more than he could imagine. Your Majesty, he said gently, you were young, you were scared. You did what you thought you had to do. No, the queen's voice was sharp. I did what was easy. There is a difference. She wiped her eyes with a graceful movement. That is why I protected your children. That is why I dismissed Vorath, because I saw in you the courage I never had, and I saw in your children the ghost of the daughter I failed. She turned to face Dohun fully. Her eyes were clear now, filled with something like determination. I want to do something. Something I should have done 300 years ago. I want to change our laws. I want to save the children like your daughter was saved. But I need your help. My help? Dohun was confused. What can I do? I am just a janitor. You are a father, the queen corrected. A father who taught his deaf children to speak with their hands. You have knowledge that no one in my empire has. You have experience that no one else can provide. I want you to teach us. I want you to create a school. A place where deaf Veloran children can learn the language you created. A place where they can have a voice. Dohun stared at her. He could not believe what he was hearing. Your Majesty, I do not know if I can do that. I am not a teacher. I am not educated. I just taught my children because I love them. That is exactly why you are perfect, the queen said. You did not teach them because it was your job. You taught them because you cared. That is the kind of teacher my people need. Someone who sees deaf children not as curses to be thrown away, but as people who deserve to be heard. She reached out and took Dohun's rough, calloused hands in her smooth, ancient ones. Please, she said, help me fix what I broke 300 years ago. Help me save the children I failed to save. Help me give them what you gave your children, a voice, a future, a family. Dohun looked at the queen. He saw the pain in her eyes. He saw the hope. He saw a woman who had carried guilt for 3 centuries and finally had a chance to make things right. He thought about Lyra and Kale. He thought about how scared they had been when he found them. He thought about how happy they were now. He thought about all the other children out there, hidden in shadows, thrown away like garbage, waiting for someone to find them. Maybe he could help. Maybe he could do something more than clean floors. Maybe he could change things. Okay, he said, I will try. The queen smiled. It was the first time Dohun had ever seen her smile. It made her look younger. It made her look like the mother she had once been. Thank you, she said. Thank you for being braver than I ever was. Dohun shook his head. I am not brave, Your Majesty. I was just too stubborn to give up. Perhaps, the queen said, but sometimes stubbornness and bravery are the same thing. 3 months passed faster than Dohun thought possible. In that time, his entire life changed in ways he never could have imagined. He was no longer a janitor cleaning floors in the quiet hours of the night. He was now the cultural ambassador of human sign language to the Veloran Empire. It was a title he found ridiculous every time he heard it, but he had accepted it because it meant his children could have a better life. Lyra and Kale were enrolled in the finest school on the Veloran homeworld. At first, the other children did not know what to make of them. Two deaf Velorans who talked with their hands and had a human for a father. They were strange. They were different. Some children were cruel, as children often are. But Lyra and Kale were not alone anymore. They had each other. They had their father. And slowly, the other children began to see them not as curses, but as classmates. Some of them even started learning sign language, just so they could be friends with the strange twins who spoke with their hands. The school for the deaf was built on the homeworld, in a beautiful building with large windows and gardens full of flowers. The queen had spared no expense. She wanted it to be perfect. She wanted it to be a place of hope. When the school first opened its doors, Dohun did not know what to expect. How many deaf children were there in the Veloran Empire? How many had been hidden away in shame? How many were still alive? The answer broke his heart. On the first day, over 200 children arrived. They came from all over the empire. Some were brought by parents who had hidden them for years, praying for a miracle. Some were brought by officials who had found them in dark places, abandoned and alone. Some were already teenagers, old enough to remember being thrown away, old enough to carry scars that would never fully heal. They were scared. Most of them had never met another deaf person before. They had spent their whole lives thinking they were the only ones, that they were broken and wrong and worthless. And now, suddenly, they were in a room full of people just like them. Dohun stood at the front of the room and looked at all those frightened faces. His throat was tight. His eyes burned with tears he was trying not to shed. These children had suffered so much. They had lost so much. And now they were looking at him, a human, waiting for him to say something that would make sense of it all. He took a deep breath and raised his hands. The first sign he made was simple. He touched his heart with one hand, then spread both arms wide, then brought them back together. Home. The children stared at him. They did not understand. They had never seen sign language before, but something about the gesture made them pay attention. Dohun made the sign again, slower this time. Home. Then he pointed at the room around them. He pointed at the children. He pointed at himself, and he made the sign again. Home. One child in the front row, a small girl with wide, dark eyes, raised her hands and tried to copy him. Her movements were clumsy, uncertain, but she made the sign. Home. Dohun smiled at her and nodded. Then he made another sign. This one was even simpler. He pointed at himself, then at her, then at everyone in the room. Family. The girl copied him again. Family. And then the child next to her tried, and the one next to him. And soon, all 200 children were raising their hands, making the same two signs over and over again. Home, family. Dohun could not hold back his tears anymore. They streamed down his face as he watched these broken, abandoned children speak their first words. They were not broken. They had never been broken. They had just been waiting for someone to give them a voice. The months that followed were hard work. Dohun had to train other teachers, people who could help him reach all the children who needed to learn. He started with Murray, the librarian who had helped care for Lyra and Kale. She was a natural. She learned sign language faster than anyone Dohun had ever seen, and she had a gentle way with the children that made them trust her. Then came others. Velorans who had lost deaf family members and wanted to help. Velorans who were simply curious and became devoted. Even some humans who worked on the homeworld and wanted to be part of something good. The language grew. When Dohun had taught only Lyra and Kale, he had adapted human sign language for their Veloran hands, which had different fingers and different movements. Now, with so many children learning, the language became even richer. The children invented new signs for things that did not exist in human culture. They created words for Veloran foods, Veloran games, Veloran feelings that humans did not have words for. It was no longer just human sign language. It was something new, something that belonged to both species, something beautiful. The queen visited the school often. She never announced her visits. She would simply appear in the corridors, watching the children play and learn and grow. Sometimes she would sit in on classes, observing as Dohun or one of the other teachers led lessons. Sometimes she would walk through the gardens, where children ran and laughed in the sunshine. On the day of the school's one-year anniversary, the queen came for a special ceremony. The courtyard was filled with children, parents, teachers, and officials from across the empire. It was the largest gathering of deaf Velorans in the history of their species. Dohun stood to the side with Lyra and Kale, watching as the queen took her place on a small stage. She looked out at the crowd, and for a moment her ancient eyes seemed to see something far away. Perhaps she was thinking of her own daughter, the one she had lost so long ago. Perhaps she was thinking of all the children who had been lost before this school existed. "1 year ago," the queen began, "I met a human janitor in my diplomatic wing. He was protecting 2 deaf children from one of my own commanders. He was willing to die for them. And I asked myself, why?" The crowd was silent, listening. "He told me that they were his children. I said they could not be his children because they were Veloran and he was human. And do you know what he said?" The queen paused. Her eyes found Dohun in the crowd. "He said that blood does not make a family, love does." She let those words hang in the air. "For 300 years I have ruled this empire. I have made many decisions. Some were wise, some were foolish. But the best decision I ever made was listening to that human janitor, because he showed me something I had forgotten. He showed me that our value is not determined by what we can or cannot do. It is determined by how we love and how we are loved." The queen raised her hands. Her movements were slow and careful, clearly practiced many times. She made the sign for thank you. It was not perfect. Her ancient fingers did not move as smoothly as the children's, but she made it. The ruler of 100 star systems, speaking in a language that had not existed in her empire 1 year ago. The children erupted in applause, their hands waving in the air, which was how deaf people clapped. The sound was silent, but the joy was deafening. Dohun felt someone tug at his sleeve. He looked down and saw Lyra and Kale looking up at him. "Father," Lyra signed, "is the queen crying?" Dohun looked at the stage. The queen was indeed crying. Tears ran down her silver cheeks as she watched the children celebrate. "Yes," he signed back, "she is." "Why?" Kale asked. Dohun thought about the question. He thought about everything that had happened in the past year. He thought about the children who had been saved, the families who had been reunited, the lives that had been changed. "Because sometimes," he signed, "when something is very beautiful it makes us cry. Not because we are sad, but because we are happy." The children considered this. Then Kale smiled and signed something to his sister. Lyra giggled and nodded. Together, the twins ran toward the stage. The guards tried to stop them, but the queen waved them away. Lyra and Kale climbed the steps and stood in front of the most powerful being in 100 star systems. And then they hugged her. The crowd went silent. No one had ever hugged the queen before. It was unthinkable. It was against every rule and tradition. But the queen did not push them away. Instead, she knelt down and wrapped her arms around the 2 small children. She held them tight, her eyes closed, tears still streaming down her face. Dohun watched his children hug the queen. He thought about how far they had come. 3 years ago, they had been dying in a garbage pile, abandoned and alone. Now they were on a stage, in front of thousands of people, hugging the ruler of an empire. And they were not afraid. They were not ashamed. They were just two children showing love the only way they knew how. When the queen finally stood up, she looked at Do-hun. Their eyes met across the courtyard. "You humans have a strange power," she said, her voice carrying through the silent crowd. "You take broken things and make them whole." Do-hun smiled and shook his head. He raised his hands and signed his response. And because the children had been teaching, because sign language was spreading, because things were changing, much of the crowd understood him. "We just see things differently, Your Majesty. Where you saw a curse, I saw my family." The queen nodded slowly. Then, for the second time in 300 years, she smiled. And in the courtyard full of deaf children and their families, surrounded by people of two species who had found a way to understand each other, Do-hun felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He felt like he was home,